Today is primarily all about education here in Morning at NTV, and it comes at a very structured time when children have just returned to school. But some of the things that we engage in as stakeholders in the education sector is to not question one of the deficiencies, especially for the end users, is that we never question some of the things that our children have to go through, the kind of education that they are receiving. Versus the costs to which that you're paying for the education, the supposed education. So in our more conversation still, we're going to be looking to a report on pre-primary education in Uganda. And the backbone is that for us in Uganda, pre-primary education is only offered by private providers. There's no public school that gives you pre-primary education, and that comes down to policy and the Education Act that we'll later look into. And so fees creates a very insurmountable barrier to accessing this pre-primary education for many families. There's a family in my community that has some little children that have to go back to school, but the cost of taking them for pre-primary education is quite heavy and hefty for the kind of family and what they can afford. So these children end up sitting down, and that is already a disadvantage to the labor force later on in life. Anyway, so this report is going to be showing how fees for pre-primary education are causing the majority of Ugandans' children, one, to miss out on early learning, two, to contribute to socioeconomic development, but also the interruption in schooling, premature enrollment, and the poor performance in their later stages of education, primary, secondary, tertiary, and university, and so on and so forth. And then you also get to look at higher repetition and dropout rates, the widening of the economic inequality, all stemming down to the foundation, what should be the grassroots of education. So the Human Rights Watch and the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights will be launching their latest joint report on pre-primary education in Uganda. And to traverse this report and its finding, we are joined by Jo Becker from Children's Rights Advocacy Director with the Human Rights Watch. Then we also do have Musa Mugoya, who's a program officer with ISER, both joining me on set this morning. I'm going to allow you your salutations, then we get into the tough conversation, starting with you, Jo.
Thank you very much for having us. We look forward to this conversation about pre-primary here in Uganda.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Priscilla, for hosting us, and good morning, our viewers.
Okay. Jo, let's start with looking at the importance of pre-primary education. Yes. Why was it necessitated in the first place? Because I'm sure the founders, or those who sat down and realized it's necessary, did not think of it out of the blue, and it's been very instrumental either way.
Yes. So for young children under the age of 6, this is the time in their life when their brains are developing most quickly. And so it's a critical moment for learning. And so what we found, the research shows that children who have access to pre-primary or to nursery, they develop more quickly, they have better performance in school, they have lower repetition rates, they have better health, and as adults they have better jobs and better earnings. So we see a whole host of benefits that really impact children positively for the whole of their lives. And pre-primary also has very positive impacts for society, because when women aren't at home dealing with childcare, they also earn more money and can contribute to the Ugandan economy. We see that the government spends less on health care and has better economic development. The other thing is that when children have access to nursery, it has a powerful impact on reducing poverty and reducing economic inequalities. And that's a positive thing as well.
Okay, all right. Musa, turning to you, let's look at the role of the ministry playing a particular segment in this education conversation. Most recently, when we were post-COVID-19 and the ministry was trying to rearrange itself and have the education sector, both public and private, fly again, the most inconsidered part of education was the pre-primary education or the nursery education. Yes. And that was primarily because when you look at regulations and policy-wise, there's minimal attention that is given to the nursery education or pre-primary education.
Yeah, thank you very much. I understand where you're coming from, and the reasons for the limitation of the government role in the delivery of nursery education or pre-primary education. It is because of the the structure of our laws. Under the Education Act, actually it is called the Education Act, Pre-Primary, Primary and Post-Primary Act of 2008, it provides for various levels of education. It recognizes pre-primary, primary and post-primary, which includes A-level and the technical tertiary. However, under pre-primary, the law under Section 10 provides that it is the responsibility, the running of nursery schools or pre-primary schools is the responsibility of private agencies, and its financing is by parents and guardians of the children. Then it goes ahead, as far as government is concerned, its responsibility is to ensure that there is a curriculum for nursery school. Two, to ensure that there is a licensing and registration of pre-primary schools. Then three, to also provide standards which are supposed to be followed, basic standards and minimum standards which are supposed to be followed by each and every pre-primary school. So that is as far as government is concerned, that is their limitation. That is the reason why post-COVID, whenever people are raising the issue, government would say, but under the law, it is not our responsibility to provide. Our responsibility is more of a regulator. So that is the limit. Actually, that's the challenge. And you find that most of the primary schools in the country, those are implementing UPE, and even those ones that are not implementing UPE, but they are either public schools or they are government aided, they do not have a public pre-primary school. If you find any pre-primary school in those schools, for example, even here in Kampala, Nakasero, Uganda Road, Chitante, those are schools where its establishment is an initiative of the teachers of that school and maybe the parents of the nearby, within the nearby community.
To create the pre-primary section.
Yes, create the pre-primary section.
Okay.
And as a result of that, you find that in most of those UPE schools, the school fees for nursery or for pre-primary is like 3 times or 4 times the one paid by those in primary. Because as far as the pre-primary is concerned, there is no government law. It means the fees paid by the parents has to pay the teachers, has to pay each and everything. And I think that is where the challenges are coming.
Okay, all right. But the Education Act that you speak of, it can be amended, you know, to have reconsideration towards giving more focus on the pre-primary education. And I suppose the research in one way or another can be able to drive that kind of influence towards the Education Ministry. Let's talk about the research, Jo, in regards to what really caused the necessitation of coming up with this research, sitting down as experts and saying, you know what, if we are going to move in this direction, we need to have data that can inform the decisions that we believe should be made.
We were very concerned at Human Rights Watch and ISER that the lack of government-provided pre-primary was harming Ugandan children. And so for the last 2 years, we've conducted a study to try and ascertain what are the harms that children are experiencing. And so in different parts of the country, we interviewed over 100 teachers, parents, children, and education officials to get an accurate picture. And what emerged is that, as Musa's indicated, the #1 barrier is cost. The majority of Ugandan families simply can't afford the fees that pre-primary schools are charging. So the result is that fewer than 1 in 10 Ugandan children is in a licensed and registered preschool, and 60% are not in school at all. We found that the consequences are that, you know, many of these children, they have deficits for the rest of their lives. When they get to primary school, they're not prepared. Their repetition rate is twice the rate of children who have access to nursery. They're more likely to drop out. We also found that many children enter nursery, but then they have to be withdrawn because their parents can't keep up with the fees. And you know, we see also that, you know, the children who need pre-primary the most are children from poor and rural areas, and yet they're least likely to get it. because the private providers tend to set up their schools in urban areas where they believe families will be more likely to afford the fees. And so we see a whole range of negative impacts. And it's frankly costing the Ugandan government quite a bit of money. For example, with the high repetition rates, it could actually save the government $25 billion by providing nursery for those children to lower the repetition rates.
Okay, so the report is being released tomorrow. Yes. Who are the stakeholders that you hope this report will be able to help make the right decisions for a better education in Uganda?
Well, the primary stakeholder is, of course, the government. We had a good meeting yesterday with the Ministry of Education and Sports, and they'll be participating in our launch of the report tomorrow. One of our main recommendations is that the government of Uganda should create nursery units at every UPE school so that children can access free nursery education. And, you know, Musa's already spoken about the law. We are also recommending that the 2008 Education Act be amended to make clear that the responsibility for funding pre-primary should be the government's and not parents.
Okay. Musa, in regards to the cost of pre-primary education, because now if it's left to the private sector and then the parents to do the financing, from the research, what has informed reasons as to why a child at pre-primary is paying 500,000 Ugandan shillings, yet at P1 they're going to be paying 150,000 shillings?
Okay, I'll come to that, but maybe briefly just to add on what, for example, the key stakeholders that we are targeting. One, we are looking at Ministry of Education, as she has indicated. We had a meeting with them yesterday. We are also looking at Ministry of Finance, because usually they are the ones that do the allocations within the executive. Then we are looking at Parliament in terms of amending the law, the Education Act, and also appropriation. We are also looking at development partners. World Bank, we had a meeting with them, and we also, they welcome the whole idea because they also have a section on pre-primary education. We are meeting various embassies that finance education, Uganda, Ireland, Iceland, and so on. To get back your question on what is informing a certain school charging a lot of money in pre-primary and then less money in primary. One is, I think, because of the fact that there is no government support or government funding when it comes to the administrative costs. For example, the teachers. The pre-primary school have, because the teachers are entirely private, even when a unit is attached to a UPE school. So then the other aspect is about the materials which are used, the instruction materials. We were at Makere Child Study Center, and the ladies there that are running that facility told us that running a pre-primary school is expensive because you need a lot of materials to use, because these children want to pray. And they told us that most of the time actually it is about praying, because at that time they are just preparing them how to associate with other learners, with their fellow learners. So they need a lot of materials to use, need a lot of space and all that. But actually also the pre-primary is not even about the cost alone. Remember, for pre-primary in Uganda we do not have right now we don't have a national school feeding program. So we find that most children in primary and secondary go to school without eating anything. But now you can't send a child who is 3 years, 4 years to a pre-primary school without providing food. So sometimes actually the cost which is involved is even before you pay the school fees, but there are also other attendant costs, especially to do with the feeding, sometimes transport, because you find that the available pre-primary school is a bit far from the home, and then the parent has to go to work. Maybe sometimes you find that he has to wake up very early, and at that moment he or she can't move with the child, so he says, oh, the child will go after a certain time, but he or she can't walk because, I mean, she is still young, yes. So you just now to pay the transport cost. So that is really what is driving cost. But most importantly, it is the fact that there is no government funding, because what happens to primary and secondary is that in addition to providing infrastructure under the Act, the government obligations to provide infrastructure, to provide the teaching and non-teaching staff on government payroll, then to also provide what they call capitation grant, which is used to buy the instructional materials and also to maintain the school and all that. Now, when it comes to pre-primary, that whole support is not there.
It's not there.
So it is the reason for the high cost.
All right, Jo. In that regard, let's have a sneak peek into the launch tomorrow. What are some of the recommendations that are going to be coming through this report?
Yes, well, Uganda has really been a leader in education in some respects, firstly by rolling out universal primary education and then universal secondary education. President Museveni has talked about the importance of early learning and nursery education. Back in 2016, he said that he wanted to see an early childhood development center attached to every primary school. So our key recommendation is to make this promise a reality. We really want to see a nursery attached to every UPE school in the country so that children have access to free nursery. We've recommended that the government start by providing 1 year of free pre-primary and then over time expand to all 3 years. And as Musa indicated, the Parliament has a key role to play by amending the Act to make clear that it's the government's responsibility to provide funding. So our launch is tomorrow at the Sheraton Hotel. We expect representatives from the Ministry of Education, parliamentarians, we expect UNICEF, other donors, NGO stakeholders, and really hope to have a conversation about how important nursery is to not only the children of Uganda, but Uganda's development and how we can make that a reality.
Okay, all right. Musa, in closing, how do we move forward, especially in this aspect of pre-primary education?
One, definitely, just to react what Jo has talked about, for government to take responsibility and ensure that we also have universal pre-primary education in Uganda. Two is to also enhance the training of teachers. They have started on it with the adoption of the teacher policy, national teacher policy, because also once the children are being subjected to instructors who are not qualified, actually in most cases what has been happening is that they just, those especially in up country, they just pick a senior for dropout, put him or her in class just to occupy these learners for that.
Just help them repeat 1, 2.
And on the issue of the cost, by the way, we have established that when you go to primary 1 or primary 2, you find that 40% of the learners are underage, they are not supposed to be in primary. It is the reason why whenever results are released, you always do analysis here at NTV. You say, but we had this number in primary 1. How come we have this less number in primary?
They don't translate to PLE.
Because those children are young and they keep on repeating.
Or the repetition syndrome that is that was discovered through the research.
And we are actually, the report establishes that if for example, pre-primary is established, it can help address the inefficiency of close to 90%. So within the budget of education, the already 24 billions, that could be utilized to finance pre-primary. Okay. Then last, the other aspect will be about to regulate the cost. Yeah, because right now, you find, we were speaking to one of the gentlemen one of the parent with a child in pre-primary in Wandegeya. He's paying 1.2 per term, yet a bachelor's degree of education at Makere is 1.1. Either actually 1,010,000 or 1,1,000,000. Yes. So, and the one for Makere,
the contrast,
is 2 semesters. Yeah, the other one is 3 terms. So you find that pre-primary is even more expensive than university education.
The irony, and it all comes down to policies. So it really does call for the revision of the Education Act of 2008, and we trust that this research is going to be doing its magic in informing government to see that they actually need to look in the direction of aiding pre-primary education through policy and regulations, so that it can too contribute to a better livelihood of humanity for Uganda, but also contribute to a better socio-economic development and influence for our country moving forward. That brings us to the end of this conversation. Thank you so much for being with us. We do have our Kickstarter coming up. Don't go away.